Welcome to Sisters in Service podcast. Most of you know me as a strong advocate for women veterans in being recognized not only as veterans, but also as women who are changing the world through our passion of serving, even after service. This podcast is my passion by telling all the stories of military brats, military spouses, active duty, and veterans, not to forget the veteran service organizations that help us along our transition journey. I want to thank you in advance for listening. I hope that you will join me every week. A new podcast and episode comes out every Tuesday, so I hope that you will join and I hope that you enjoy. This podcast is brought to you by Small Space Pilates. Are you ready to get fit and fabulous from the comfort of your own home? Look no further than Small Space Pilates. With live online Pilates and strength training classes, a video library, and a no perfection allowed policy, you can achieve your fitness goals without ever leaving your house. Click on the link for your complimentary week and start your journey to feeling fabulous today. Welcome, everyone, to our latest episode of Sisters in Service. You know me, I am Kat Corchado. And today, my guest is Jeff Nelligan. Jeff is an Army Reserve veteran. He's the father of 3 boys, and he's currently a public affairs executive in Washington, D.C. Jeff formerly worked for 3 members of the U.S. Congress and served twice as a presidential appointee. He is a well-known commentator in the world of American parenting, and his most recent work is the 2nd edition of 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons, How You Can Raise Resilient Kids, in which he outlines his parenting techniques and the path of his sons through childhood, adolescence, and to the U.S. Naval Academy, Williams College, and West Point to currently active duty military. Jeff, welcome to Sisters in Service.
Hey, Kat, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on. And, you know, you probably hear this a million times, but people like you and I can say it to each other and really mean it. Thank you for your service. Air Force veteran, 22 years, you know, it doesn't get better than that. So it's a privilege to be on.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. It was only 20, not 22. But thank you. So, Jeff, I know you were in the Army Reserve, and I always ask this question, but did you pick the Army or did the Army Reserve pick you?
I definitely picked the Army. There was something about the ruggedness of being, you know, in that kind of service. And my grandfather had been in the Army, and several cousins, as well as I like the idea of the camaraderie, being in the field. Believe it or not, that's going to sound kind of odd because some people don't like being in the field. And I was lucky because once I joined the Army Reserve, I went right to Fort Benning to infantry school. So I got the biggest dose of the Army you can ever get back in 1988. And it was everything that I'd hoped it'd be.
Oh, wow. Well, that's good because a lot of people go in and they think, no, they lied to us. This isn't the commercial.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I want to talk a little bit about raising resilient kids and what that word resilience means to you. And the reason I ask that is because it seems like it's become one of those buzzwords, you know, like being authentic, you know, stuff like that. And I think the reason that I want to talk about resilience is that I grew up in the military. And nowadays, our parents talk to their kids and they find out how they're feeling and everything, and rightfully so. But I think resilience is you either are or you're not. And resilience is getting knocked in the dirt and you get up, and you get knocked down again and you get up. It's like building your strength. It's like, you know, you don't just get it because you took a course. Resilience is going through all those things that have happened to you, but you're still here to talk about it. So, Jeff, what does resilience mean to you?
You put it perfectly. It means getting knocked down and getting back up again, and no one is holding their hand down to pull you back up. And parenting in our age, when we were young, you know, you were told what to do and you did it. And there was a reason, because your parent was an adult with many years under their belts in the real world, and they did know best. Today, resilience, as you say, has become just such a almost a meaningless word because we talk about resilience of everything. It goes to the core of a kid and adults. In all that universe, no one gets a free ride. Every day and every week, every month, every year, kids, adults hit obstacles. And the key is being able to get back up over a setback, over a trial, either around it or through it, and continue on. And the kid that can do that on a consistent basis is far ahead of his peers.
Wow. Yeah. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I think when I think about resilience, and I'm going to use me and my brother as an example, you could leave me in a room and play by myself, and I was fine. I was totally okay by myself. My brother was not. I could make friends easily. My brother could not. And I think that, and I don't know what it was about myself, but I think that, coming from a military family, when you talk about resilience, there were certain things and certain rules as military brats that we had to follow. And I think that, being from a military family, that, if your dependent got in trouble, guess who else got in trouble?
Yeah.
The active duty military member. And so
Yes.
it kind of made you think twice about, you thought about, okay, this is wrong. Is it worth getting in trouble? Or do I just go home and, it cancels each other out? But I think when we talk about resilience, we talk so much to our children, about their feelings and about their, how they're doing and all this other stuff. And I get that. My parents did none of that. And I'm just going to go back to, we were in Germany during the 72 Olympics, during the Munich massacre. Do you remember that?
They certainly do. The Palestinians.
Do you? Exactly. And, having grown up on military bases all my life, I felt safe. I felt secure. I felt no one can get me. My dad's in the Air Force. Are you kidding? And at the time, I thought the Air Force was the only military that there was, the only service. And, and then that happened. And I remember I was 14 at the time. And I remember for the first time in my life feeling scared, afraid. And no one in my family said, how are you feeling about this? I know this is probably traumatic, blah, blah, blah. And we're watching the news as it's happening. We're getting it real time as opposed to the United States at that time. And you kept it inside and you just kind of said, okay, no one talked to us about it. But nowadays, that's all we do is talk to our kids about things. Sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah.
But how do parents raise resilient kids? I mean, you've done it. How do you do that?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think, I know. I think parents have to have a strategy with their kids where when they're holding that child, like you held your child, they're 2 or 3 hours old and you're looking at him or her and you're thinking, what is this individual going to become? And the military is a perfect metaphor because in the military, you always have a strategy. You have a strategy and a tactics for every day, the moment you wake up in a barracks or wherever, or in the field. And so parents have this strategy. And I think the core of the strategy should be that, as parents, our job is really not to build a relationship with our children. Much of what you've just explained, that relationship with our children, constantly checking in. No, our goal and our job as parents is to teach our kids to build a relationship with the world, the real world outside the front door, the people and the places and the situations and the challenges and the failures, the hardware store, the grocery store, the school, the community, the neighborhood, the athletic fields, because that's where that kid's going to spend the bulk of their lives. We talked
Exactly.
about this earlier. By the time a kid is
Mhm.
12, that parent has spent 75% of the time they're going to spend with that kid by the 12th birthday of that child. After that, 25% lasts until the parent departs this earth. By the
Right.
time the kid's 18, that figure goes to 90%. So the strategy is you better teach that kid to understand the world and be able to operate in
Mhm.
it with that resilience, because at a certain point, you're not going to be around anymore, and
Mhm.
you won't raise the kid, the culture will. And
That could
we'll
be bad
probably get
news.
to this, but I think the culture right now through, you know, the cell phone, the laptop, the iPad, the computer, the TV, that's is raising a large
Mhm.
majority of our kids. And of course, the results are all around us and they're not very
Yes.
good.
Well, I think today a lot of parents want to be a kid's friend. They
Oh,
don't want to do the hard stuff. And, my parents were my parents. I was scared to death of both of them. For me to ask if I could stay out late past curfew was I had to gear myself up a whole week in advance just to ask the question. And when I was raising my son, I always told him I'm wearing two hats. I have the friend hat, I have the mom hat. And there were
yeah.
times when he'd say, "What hat are you wearing?" I'm definitely wearing the mom hat. Okay. So what do you say to, about parents who just they don't want their child to feel bad. They don't want their child to be yelled at. They don't want their child to, I don't know. What do you say about all of that, Jeff?
I I couldn't agree more about, a job of a parent is not to be a kid's friend. That's why they call it parenting, not childing.
Mhm.
The job of a parent is to prepare that kid for that world. I gave them tests, and starting when they were very, very young, tests in the real world. I'll give you a quick example. When the eldest was 7 and the youngest was 4, we were in an indoor mall in the Washington, D.C. area, big, sprawling place, bustling crowds. And I took out my wallet and I gave each kid a $5 bill. And I said to each of them, go get change. This is not a race. I'll keep an eye on you, but go get change, each of you, for this 5, and just meet me back here. And of course, they loved it. It was a task, it was something different. And 2 kids struck out at one store and went to another. Another kid came back with 20 quarters in his pocket. But they came back and the test had been passed. They'd gone out in that world. So that was a great test because a 7-year-old, they were delighted the fact they had navigated the strangers and the strange places to accomplish this. And of course, over the years, we pulled that test a lot in bigger venues. And then, of course, it accelerated. And we would go to a restaurant and I'd point at the 6-year-old and I'd say, you memorize all of our orders and tell the waiter or the waitress what we're having.
Mhm.
Or we'd pull up outside of a bank and I'd say, give a card to a kid and say, here's your old man's ATM card. Here's the passcode. Go get me $300. Or in an airport,
Mhm.
here's the paperwork. Go get us 5 boarding passes. Or when they were 11 and 10 and 11, dad's going to change the oil on the car, only dad's not going to
Mhm.
do it. You're going to do it. And I'm going to be there every
Gonna
step of the way showing
watch.
you how to do
Yeah.
it. And
You
here's how
have to
you enforce
teach
it.
them. You have to
Right.
show them.
Right. You give them those tests publicly and sometimes privately, i.e., sitting under a car waiting for the oil to, splash on your face. But they become confident and independent. And then when they get a task or there's some, rough thing ahead, the muscle memory kicks in that, hey, I've done this kind of thing before. I can get through this. And
Mhm.
those are the tests that you build. That's part of the strategy that you have. And it creates the resilience you want in that kid.
It builds that confidence muscle. They're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Yeah, I did this." And then you ask
Right.
them to do something different, and they're like, "Okay." And then they go do that, and all of a sudden they're ticking things off. That's so important to teach kids how to be in the world, how to treat people in the world. And I know
Right.
you had talked about this earlier, Jeff, but I wanted to ask again about, what role does technology and social media, how does it impact resilience in kids today? But also, how can parents find a balance between the two?
Certainly, Kat. Boy, it's a great question. I operate from the thesis that I've had for 20 years that the digital media in all its forms, the cell phone, as I said earlier, the laptop, the iPad, the computer, is such a painfully passive exercise that there's no movement in the kid's imagination or the kid's effort. Plus, there's no movement in the kid, which is one reason, 19% of kids under the 18 are obese or overweight. So you've got that problem too. And I think in this day and age, parents have almost abrogated their responsibility as a parent to the glowing rectangle. And this is not just, Nelly talking about his anecdotes. It's well documented. The average kid between the ages of 10 and 18 spends 8 hours and 47 minutes a day on a screen of some type. And that doesn't include schoolwork. So if you figure that's more than they sleep.
Yes.
Average kid, boy, between the ages of 10 and 24 spends an average of 2 hours and 10 minutes video gaming every day.
That's a lot.
That's unbelievable. Again, these stats are from the most recent and the best book that's been written about this phenomenon. It's called Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation. It came out 4 weeks ago, and it's number 4 on Amazon right now. Dr. Haidt is a guy who's been looking at social media and digital media for 15 years. And so he's chronicled what this has done. And his conclusion is the phone is in many families raising the kid, the screen, and not the parent. I think, with that is the kind of the reason for what we see today in young people. I think the approach to mitigate it is simple. Now, I'm a devotee of shock treatment. Maybe it's a military background. I'm not sure. But if your kid's looking at a phone or a screen 9 hours a day, you have a major problem as a parent. And you've got to confront the problem. When I say shock treatment, I mean, you sit down with a kid and you yank the device out of their hand and say, there are new rules for this, and they're going to start now. And that becomes the social media contract that you and your kid and your family develop in terms of when it can be brought out, how many hours it can be used a day, in what instances it can be used. And that contract covers everything from looking at it in a car, at dinner or lunch or breakfast, as well as, at 8 o'clock tonight, the routers are going off in the house. So you go.
My brother did that with his kids, turned it off.
Right. Or there are packages you can buy from Google that eliminate vast amounts of websites that a kid can visit. At the same time, the parent has got to be the one that's not always scrolling on their phone either. And so it's a two-way contract. It's not just
they
the
learn
kid
by example.
Right, the parent banging on the kid. It's, I'm going to be the model here because things have gotten out of control in our household.
Right.
And so I think that's, again, I'm not alone in this. Dr. Haidt, Jonathan Twenge, Gene Twenge from San Diego State University, Paul Tuff. There's plenty of other people who have been banging this drum. I was banging it way back, in 2007, 2008, when the iPhone really first hit its stride. And then, of course, 2010, when the features and the connectivity to the internet blossomed and they could actually download, sustained video. And that's where Dr. Haidt, puts that marker when things started to just get out of control.
I think it's interesting that when I was going to school, and I don't know why I remember this, but we got 3 full months out of school. I remember being out of school prior to Memorial Day weekend, and we
Right.
didn't go back
Right.
to school until the first week of September.
Yeah.
And there were days when we were so bored that we would make up games. We would make up
Right.
stuff to do. And that's what kids, when you're bored is when your brain's like, what if we did this? They have that chance. Your brain, no, today, being on the phone all the time doesn't give your child's brain a chance to say, hey, what if we did this? Or to even get
Right.
the parent involved. And we talked about this earlier is, what is your child interested in besides the phone? Get
Yeah.
in their world. You may not know anything about the game they're playing, but sit down and say, show me what you're doing. I want to see, how do I play? Play me on this. Can I, get involved with them? And you might be surprised at what you may find.
Right. And, I really like your example um, of the 3 months for summer. It narrows in on such a key aspect. What in the heck filled up that 9 hours before that phone was there?
Imagination.
When you and me, you and myself, well, right. Didn't I say earlier, the phone is a passive endeavor and there's no imagination needed. It's just, you know, sucking that tube, so to speak, of whatever
Exactly.
entertainment your fingers can alight on. Uh, that's why we call it parenting. Again, if you're going to take your kid's phone usage down from 9 hours to 1 hour a day, you, the parent, have a responsibility to fill that time. Now you can craft, you can be outside, you can do board games. There are all sorts of
All
endeavors in this
sorts of
world: the
things.
athletic world, theater, music,
Mhm.
uh, the robotics club, scouting, just taking everyone out in the car
Mhm.
to a trail and saying, we're going to be on this thing for the next 8 hours. So get ready.
Buckle up.
Right. But again, that's the engagement of the parent. And that also goes back
Mhm.
to what I had mentioned earlier about having that strategy for how you're going to guide this kid,
Mhm.
or the culture raises the kid, not the parent.
Right. Well, I want to talk about failure for a second. And I don't call anything failure. I call it failing forward. And I want to kind of caveat it into sports only because it was through sports that I learned the rules. I learned there were rules. If you didn't
Yeah.
follow the rules, there were consequences. And learning how to play on a team, learning how to be part of a team. And I learned a lot through sports along with things in life. And I remember a time when I was playing basketball and we went to a tournament, and this girl that was playing on a certain team got her it was an MVP award. And I thought, I want one of those. Now I didn't say, well, why does she get one and I don't? I said,
Right.
what do I need to do to get that MVP trophy? Which is get better, et cetera. I practiced and everything. And the next year I got the MVP trophy. But I think
Wow.
we started going downhill when we started giving all the kids participating trophies.
Yeah.
We started this downward spiral of, I don't ever want my kid to feel bad. No, okay. And let me say this, I never want my child to feel bad, but life happens. Stuff
Oh, yeah.
happens. Okay.
Right.
And you have to prepare them for it. Be like, okay, look, the first time, my son played on a team and he came back and said, I quit. And I said, oh, no, you don't, Buster.
Right.
You signed up for that team. You signed up for the season. You are playing the whole season. And so what do you say about how failure or failing forward, how does that play into building resilience? And how can parents help children navigate that failing forward effectively?
Yeah, I like, here we go. You said it just moments ago, the feelings.
Mhm.
I'm really tired of hearing about feelings from kids. only is that eclipsed by hearing about feelings from adults.
Yeah.
You know, the world. I'll never forget going to a lacrosse tournament at a high end prep school here in the Mid Atlantic, and we were driving down the main drag of the school to the fields, and it was early in the morning, and there was college coaches there. I mean, it was a big deal. And all along on the banners along the road inside the school were, justice and inclusion and patience and, and I was looking at them and we were reading them off out loud. And then I said, and there's also SATs, all conference, GPA. And my kids started laughing because here's a 10-year-old kid who gets it. The world doesn't judge you on feelings. It judges you on performance. And the performance is, and I told him this, I said, we're not being judged about how we feel in this game coming up. Your parents and your coaches and your teachers and your peers and all the adults around you judge you on how well you do a certain thing, not how you feel about it. Yes. And that's what's going to win today is how good you are, not how you feel about things. And you make a good point because the athletic fields are a good metaphor for the things you learn that contribute to resilience. You said it yourself. I wanted to be the MVP next year. So I am going to undertake all the things, the personal discipline it takes for Kat to be the MVP next year. At the same time, in that kind of an athletic environment in which my kids were always involved, you learn camaraderie. A whole team is together. And there are always times on a team when you don't even like some of the guys, but you have to get along with them because it's for the team. Absolutely. There's also the adversity. That's the great thing about athletics. At the end of the game, there's that scoreboard, and it has a winner on it and a loser. And you don't want to be that loser because that losing is even kids with feelings don't like losing, right?
Yeah, it doesn't feel good.
And the third thing is the adversity. So you got the adversity, the winning and losing. You got the camaraderie, and then to end with what you began with, that personal discipline. So those three things, and the athletic metaphor is used constantly, but I'll tell you, it's the same thing in a marching band or theater production or the robotics club, again, any kind of endeavor where a bunch of like-minded kids get together and they have a goal. Yes. And their parents support them towards that goal. And they get all of those traits and those qualities all thrown into it.
Absolutely. I also think that, and let me just say this, that I always hear parents and kids say, well, it's not fair that this person got to play. It's not fair that I didn't get picked for this. We have to understand that there are a lot of things that aren't fair. Okay. Yeah. I see it in sports even today. I see, watching the basketball finals and I'm like, okay, that was totally not right. But you also, I didn't know I was going to get the MVP award, but I was willing to work towards it. Would I thought I was a failure if I hadn't gotten it? I would have felt a little bad for a while, but at least I did what was required. I was trying. You know what I mean? I was trying to, and I'd say, okay, I'm not getting it this year. I'm going to keep working until I try to get it. And that's where the resilience is built in. It's through that, not I quit because I didn't get to play and I don't want to be friends anymore, or I can't play because I don't like that person on the team. And I think, when kids or parents say, my son's never going to play sports because I just don't think it's, whatever. And you'd be surprised at what your child will learn in sports, period. Whether, and not even sports. I'm not even talking acting. Maybe it's the chess club. Maybe it's the book club. Maybe it's like you said, robotics. You
Yeah.
learn how to compete as a team and to help each other in, when one person's down, everyone picks you up and says, look, we win as a team and we lose as a team, but we're still a team. And I
Right.
think that parents need to be on their child's team and not their teammate. Ooh, that was
Yeah.
good.
I like that. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. That's really good.
Well, I do
But you got a
know.
great point about, the unfairness of it all. Again, the world is full of excuses.
Yes.
Once you rely on an excuse, the next one is much easier. And if you're taking the side of your kid rather than saying, hey, look, man, guess what? It didn't go your way. So, stand up and we'll try it again. But if you give a kid that outlet of an excuse, too many times you're doomed. As I said, and we talked about this earlier, by 12, that's 75% of that kid's life that you spent with them. You have better be turning out a strong, good-natured, confident, resilient kid. Because
Absolutely.
if you turned out the excuse kid, by 18, the excuses have only mounted in size and importance. And then everything the kid confronts can be easily turned aside by an excuse. And then the kid's 24 and he's living in your basement. And he's getting really good at Minecraft. And, you're making the excuses now for him to everybody else.
Exactly.
So,
well, I know that in today's society, there are a lot of, there were stressors when I was going to school, and there's stressors now, for kids. So how would you tell a parent what would you say to them if they're trying to address the signs of stress and anxiety in their child, that they're seeing signs of it? What kind of advice would you give that parent?
well, again, it's funny. You said feelings is kind of overused and resilience. I think stress is a word that's overused. I mean, I had an uncle who went ashore in Normandy on day 14, and he was lying near a field and some hedgerows, and artillery wiped out about half of his platoon, dead and wounded. And he was laying there, and he was about 30 miles inland, and he was thinking to himself, and he told us later, we're never going to make it to Berlin. So I hear about people's stress today, and I think, boy,
that's stress.
The self-absorption of someone who says they have stress in the 21st century in the wealthiest and best educated and most open society in the history of mankind, and they have stress. Are they built for, even living 2 more years? My gosh, they'll have a heart attack.
Exactly. At a very young age.
I just, when I hear that word, I just kind of wince. I think, plenty of people prior to us have gone through real trials in their lives, and they go through them every day. And we have people talking about the stress of work, or the stress. I'm so crazy busy all the time. If you're crazy busy, guess what? The third time I hear it, I'm going to say to you, you're crazy disorganized. So with kids, parents dealing with kids, again, we go back to, and you said it actually first, I'm not your friend. I'm not your best friend that you can come to and just, emote about all the difficulties that I face in my life. Gosh, grow up. Even if a kid is 7, grow up. If you think this is bad, you just wait. Because things are always going to be really tough. And that kid, that marker, that resilient kid is, it's tough, but I'm going to find a way through it, And when it really gets nutty or desperate, I can go to mom and dad and say, hey, old man, I need help. I wouldn't
Yes.
ask you if I didn't
Yeah.
need it. One time my kids were in a boys' school, and they were asked to participate in the sister school's production of the Pirates of Penzance.
Mm-hmm.
And they were young kids. They were 9 and 10. And they brought home the notice, and I said, "Oh, this is great, man. You should do it." And they go, "No, we don't want to do it." And I said, "Well, it'll look really good on your permanent record and, at school." "No, we don't want to do it." And I said, "Okay, here's my second pitch. You're used to being in front of 200 people playing games, and half of them are
Yes.
screaming at you to fail, the opponent's parents.
Yes.
You're used to being on stage. No, we don't want to do it." So finally I said, "Look, I'll give you $10 each if you just go to the tryouts, and I'll be waiting outside. And if you don't like it, just come out and I'll be in the car waiting there, and we'll go home." So Saturday morning came, and they had their $10 in each had $10 in their pocket, and they walked in the doors, and I drove away. And I came back 2 hours later, and they walked out of the auditorium, and they had these little plastic pirate swords, and they had bandanas on their head.
And they had a great time.
Yeah. And they get in the car, and I said to them, joking around, I said, "Well, I'm glad I didn't wait,
Yeah.
And the the eldest kid says to me, he says, "Dad, we knew you wouldn't wait. We knew this was a test."
He learned quick.
Right. You learn quick, but you see what I mean? You got a kid acclimated to something they don't even want to do, and you take them there, and they know the old man's left. This is part of the test. And guess what? Oh, we're so stressed out. No, we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to go through with it and kind of be edgy on stage, but then get along with everybody, and then say, "Hey, this was actually pretty fun." So that's when you say about parents, meeting up with kids about things, they've got to have those tests and examples in the past so that the kid doesn't feel that way constantly. A constantly anxious kid is going to be a nutcase, by the age of 18 or earlier. You can't, anxiety is just, is compounded interest really over time.
Let's talk about your book for a second. What inspired you to write 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons?
Certainly. Kat, Mike, and because you're in the service, you kind of know this. My kids all followed this path of, wanting to be in, the athletic scene, the athletic metaphor again, as we say, the camaraderie, the ruggedness of life, the working towards a goal, the team aspect. And so they all went in the service, and the last one finally, left for West Point. And I drove home that day after dropping him off. And, I can't imagine a parent of a kid who was not geared for or entering the military under even standing, what went on that day. And they put you in this big auditorium, and a general starts talking, and then he suddenly stops, and then he says, "You have 1 minute to say goodbye to your cadet, and then you must exit the building." And
wow.
all these kids get up, and parents, and everyone's, weeping and sobbing. And then you don't see the kid for 2 months. And what those kids do in that ensuing 2 months is just, it's similar to what basic training's like. It's pretty rough physically and mentally. You're getting screamed at all the time. But I drove home, and I'm sitting on the back porch, and I thought, this is really the end, of parenting for me. And I talked to a lot of people who would always ask me, why, your kids all, they have it together, and they're all 3 now, the third one, in the service. And, and I thought, yeah, it's been a pretty good story. And I should say too, that my ex, their mom, deserved 90% of the credit for how they turned out. I get about 10% for being a major league nag. So let's get that out there right away. But also, too, Kat, I think part of the reason, and you articulated it earlier, was just concern about where this generation's going. Just, hey, why are parents falling down, at their jobs? And, I'm an unfiltered guy, and I have been my entire life. Maybe that's because I was in politics for so many years, but
I'm just going to say, I love that you put that in your book. You said, trigger warning. In keeping with the fragility of the age, let me say it now, I am an unfiltered guy.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, I think I'll extend this, I think, well, first of all, my age and experience, but also too, I mean, particularly for, a 20-year vet, a 20-year vet is like me. We've seen pretty much it all.
Yes.
We've seen every human dynamic. We've geographically seen the world. We've been around people that have been from every zip code in the United States.
Exactly.
Of every class, poor, wealthy, and middle class. We've seen the gamut of how the human condition is. So when we're asked to comment on it, or when we're just taking it in, that unfiltered lens, comes to the fore, because what are you going to show me that I already haven't seen? So I wrote the book in that unfiltered way of, here are the 4 things that I built into my kid, personal courtesy, confidence, that resilience in adversity, and ambition. Those 4 things that are part of that strategy, which I think parents, as I mentioned at the beginning, should have. And so that's how it came about. And, it's not you've got it. I mean, it's not some 350-page table, coffee table monument. It's a 40-minute read. And It's pretty loose and it's pretty funny, but there's some hard shots.
Read. It's an easy read.
Yeah, and there's some hard things in there. As you'll notice, I took shots at myself throughout the book. When I was wrong, I admitted it. I admitted to my sons and said, man, I've made a mistake and it's not going to happen again. So,
and that's
it's not
huge though. That's such a big, that my parents, they might've been wrong, but they never admitted they were wrong. I decided as a parent that if I was wrong, I was going to go up to my son and say, I should not have done that. I am sorry,
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's important to do that.
Yeah. And just being honest with them, they look at you in a new light. So the next thing you tell them to do, they're probably going to do, because they're thinking, hey, he's come clean on all this stuff. So he knows what I can trust him. It's like I told, in the last chapter I write about, we drive in the Washington, D.C. area around all these huge office buildings and office parks, 20 stories of steel and glass and brick, and just, soulless and faceless, and just monotony just oozes from them. And we're and the office parks are the same way. They have these acres and acres of empty parking lots and these glass buildings. And I remember we were driving around them, and they were always fascinated by this stuff because they were inquisitive kids. And I said, guys, I got to tell you something about these buildings. I said, up there on that 7th floor, that one over there, there's a guy sitting in an office staring at a computer screen. And he's got a picture of his family on the wall, and he's got a coffee mug on his desk like you made me in 7th grade. And he's staring at the screen. He's saying, what in the hell am I doing here? I was going to be somebody. I was going to be a jet pilot, or I was going to own a big real estate firm, or I was going to start a restaurant. I was going to sail around the world. But instead, here I am in this office building staring at a screen. What in the hell am I doing here? And I said, hey guys, that's your old man. So you've got to get much, much farther than I did.
Yes.
And of course they were shocked. But boy, it really had an impact on how they approached a week decision or a year decision or a month decision on, wow, he laid it out, didn't he?
Right.
So it's that kind of honesty with your kids without being too emotional and maudlin about it.
Mhm.
that
It
will
goes a long
really,
way.
yeah, it will propel them
Mhm.
forward, right?
So, Jeff, when did you think that your experience in the military influenced your approach to parenting?
No question. I think the military is, I think it's the finest institution that this country has, next to, first responders and teachers. The
Mhm.
military enforces authority with discipline. It forces people to be better than they are.
Mhm.
And I'll go back to what we were talking about earlier. There are no excuses. You in the military, there are no excuses. You have got to get it done. You're trained, you're around guys who will help you and support you, but you have to get
Mhm.
it done. There's no institution, as I said, other than those other two, is like that in America today. And
Right.
it's just my firm belief. The fact that all three of my kids are in the service, two Navy, one Army, it's the most satisfying achievement I could ever have as a dad.
Wow, you get the Dad of the Century award. Because I mean, wow, 3 kids. And on that note, this is my last question for you. What
Sure.
advice would you give to parents who have a child that is going into the military and they're just kind of they're not sure? What would you say to those parents who say, I don't want my son or my daughter to go in the military because blank? What would you say to them?
I would kind of just mirror kind of what I just said. I would
Mhm.
say to, mom and dad, this is an institution that's going to bring out the best in your kid.
Mhm.
And there's nothing like it. And your kid emerging from this institution, whenever he or she does,
Mhm.
is going to be miles and miles ahead of his peers or her peers in everything they do.
Wow. It's funny. I was just sitting there thinking that, you see, and sometimes in the movies, and this wild kid that all of a sudden decides to go in the military, and then the parents go to their graduation, and the son's saying, "Yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am," and they're like, "Who is this child?" Right? But I
Right.
think it's not about the parents anymore at that point. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's not about you. It's about the child. It's about them standing up on their own feet. And that's the only reason I say that is because I learned how to rely on me in the
Oh, yeah.
military. I learned that I can rely on myself, that I have the decision making skills. I have the gut instinct. I have all of that. And I did not get it. And I would not have gotten it if I hadn't gone in the military. And I'm just going to leave it
And
there.
yeah, and that's the dichotomy about the military. You go into an institution where you're supposed to have complete dependence upon the barracks and the field and the mess hall and the office and your comrades. At the same time, what it's producing is the most independent thinking and independent doing
Mhm.
people that this country has.
And on that note, Jeff, where can people find you if they want to buy your book, if they
Certainly.
want to know more about you?
Sure. www.nelliganbooks.com. They can find the 4 Lessons for My 3 Sons, also a book I wrote about the pandemic and how kids or how parents could turn around some of the bad things that happened during the pandemic to their kids to a better way. It's called Your
Mhm.
Kids Rebound from Pandemic Lockdowns, a parent guide to restoring your family. So those are on the website, as well as a number of blogs I've written about kids and parents and how parents can really, energize their kids to be better than they are. Also, my Facebook page is Jeff Nelligan Books, and the Twitter handle or X handle is at Resilient Sons. Instagram is Nelligan_books, and LinkedIn is just my name, Jeff Nelligan.
And I'll make sure all of those are in the show notes too. Jeff, I
Great.
would just want to say thank you so much. This has been such an interesting conversation. You're probably one of the you're probably the only person I've had on that's talked about parenting in this way. And it's interesting to, talk about how either being in the military or being a military brat influenced you or me or any of us as parents,
Right.
but also, going in the military. And I want to say to my audience, one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest opportunities, one of the biggest, I don't know what you want to call it, is being a parent. But if you're going to be a parent, do the absolute best you can, because you're raising that child to be someone else's friend, someone else's husband or daughter, someone's comrade, someone's battle buddy. So teach them well. It's not going to be great all the time, and it's not supposed to be. So if your child has never had adversity, I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to have a rude awakening when they go out in life. So with that said, thank you, Jeff, for being here. And you guys know what I'm going to say. Please stay safe. Take care of each other. Until next time. And please remember, it's never too late to start your impossible.